Hello and welcome to this edition of My Two Cents Worth. This is the part of the channel where I give you my 2 cents worth on a particular topic. But before we go too far into it, hit that subscribe bar and then the notification bell when it comes up so you can be notified when content is added to the channel. And remember to comment on these videos, like these videos, share these videos, give them a thumbs up if you really like them. That somehow helps the algorithms, and I don't claim to understand all that, but it's always a good thing to get a thumbs up on your videos. And this edition of My 2 cents worth is brought to you by A Closer Walk with Jesus, written by me and published by 21st Century Christian. Stop and think about it for just a minute. The decision to become a Christian is the most important decision you will ever make. It is far more important than whatever job or career field you choose to go into. It's even more important than whoever you choose for your spouse. And as a part of the family of God, we each have our own responsibility to find our path for spiritual growth and maturity. And in this book, I'm going to help you chart that course. I'm going to help you discover how to have that walk. It talks about prayer. We talk about Bible study. It talks about a lot of things that, if you're considering Christianity, it would be a good book. If you're a new Christian, this will help you to get grounded. If you've been a Christian for a long time, this can help you to go back and go over some of these things that might now be hindering your growth and help you to get back on a growing path again. So if you'd like to get a copy of this, it's great for individual study. It's great for small groups like on Sunday morning or Wednesday night, or if you just want to have a small group Bible study meeting at the coffee shop or something, it'd be great for that. And you can get a copy of it by going to the website for 21st Century Christian and ordering it off of there. And if you would like to do it the old-fashioned way, you can still go into the store at 4108 Hillsborough Pike, Suite 200 in Nashville, Tennessee. And you can give them a call at 615-383-3842. Place orders over the phone if you like. And if you're outside of Middle Tennessee, 800-251-2477. The fax number is 615-292-5983. And if you would like to pay a visit to the store, kind of the way we did it back in the day, old-fashioned, Monday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and all these times are Central Time. Fridays, 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and they are closed Saturday, Sunday, and the major holidays. And if you need customer service by phone, you can do that Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., You can give them a call. And then if you're one of those who, I don't know, the last time I was in a brick and mortar store, I don't go shopping anymore. I do it all from my living room. Okay, well, Amazon.com has, I believe, just about everything that 21st Century does, and their catalog is available on Amazon.com. Or if you have a local bookstore, if you're still fortunate enough to have a locally owned business, or maybe one of those smaller regional stores that's, in 2 or 3 states, or maybe has a half a dozen locations in one state, give them a chance to earn your business. Order locally whenever you can and help out your local economy. I'm a big proponent of that. If I want to go out to eat, I'll typically go to a locally owned restaurant if it's an option. Take my car to locally owned mechanics to get it serviced. And then, if I want books, go to a local bookstore if you have them. Now, you may pay a few more dollars, but I think it'll be worth it to help the local economy. Now, for this episode of My 2 Cents Worth, I'm going to be talking about a sermon, and I'm using the air quotes for a reason. I'll explain that when we get to the end. It's a sermon by this man, James Talarico, born May 17th, 1989. He's an American politician and school teacher, first elected to the Texas State House of Representatives in 2018. To represent Texas State House District 50. He now represents District 52 in the Texas State House of Representatives. My guess is the 2020 census, which we are nationally mandated constitutionally to do, probably got some redistricting done, so now he's in a different district. I'm going to be examining and critiquing a sermon called God is Not Christian, Confronting Christian Nationalism. He preached this sermon on October the 22nd of 2023, and in this talk, he denounces something called Christian nationalism. And I've heard about Christian nationalism for the last 3 or 4 years. Now, I'd never heard of Talarico until a month or two ago when this particular sermon crossed my feed in a Facebook group that I'm in. And so I watched it and started making comments, and I thought this is take more than just one comment space on Facebook. Now, he's denouncing something called Christian nationalism, and I am not defending Christian nationalism. I am not denouncing it. I don't know what it is. I am still studying it, and I've got a book that is a advocate of Christian nationalism. The author is, and I'm almost finished with it. I'm going to do a review of it when I'm done with the book. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff on social media, a lot of chatter about Christian nationalism, how dangerous it is, and that sort of thing. But no one really defined what it is. No one has really defined their terms. I get a lot of circular reasoning, or I get a lot of very convoluted ideas. So I'm doing my homework. I'm going to make sure I know what I'm talking about before I actually do. And then I'm taking issue with some of the points that Representative Talarico makes about Christianity, about American history, and about our Constitution. And there's quite a bit there to take up as an issue and to discuss. And so with all the introductory remarks out of the way, we're ready to get into it. It's about 18 and a half minutes long. I'm going to break it down into several sections and give you some bite-sized pieces, and I'll give you my 2 cents worth with them. So with that introduction taken care of, let's go ahead and roll the clip.
Our pastor, Dr. Jim Rigby, is on his writing leave, but I don't know how much writing is really getting done. I sent him a text asking for some inspiration for this sermon, and he sent me this. It's the top reasons beer is better than religion. Number one, when you have beer, you don't knock on people's doors trying to give it away. Number two, there are laws against forcing beer on minors who can't think for themselves. Number three, nobody's ever been burned at the stake because of their favorite brand of beer. Number four, you don't have to wait more than 2,000 years for a second beer. And last, if you've devoted your life to beer, there are groups to help you.
Now, I just want to jump in here real quick. I don't have any problem with humor in the pulpit. I don't have a problem with telling a joke. Sometimes I start a sermon with a joke. Sometimes I'll be preaching and I'll stray from my prepared remarks and I'll think of something witty, or at least that I think is witty, and I'll blurt it out with the audience. But that joke itself was inappropriate. It has no place in the pulpit. A joke about how beer is better than Christianity. No, I understand he's being humorous and it's meant to be a joke, but I'm not taking this joke. I can take a joke, but not this one. That's the kind of joke I would expect if I were a drinker and hanging out in bars. I would expect somebody in the bar to tell that joke, or maybe somebody at the office to tell that joke, someone who's not a Christian and doesn't understand all the ins and outs of Christianity. And so inappropriate. If you're going to tell a joke, make sure you do your audience analysis ahead of time and make sure that the material you're going to present is appropriate. Okay, back to the speech.
My granddad was a Baptist preacher. I've been a member of this church since I was 2 years old, and now I'm in seminary studying to become a minister myself. My faith means more to me than anything. But if I'm being very honest, sometimes I hesitate before telling someone I'm a Christian. There is a cancer on our religion. Until we confess the sin that is Christian nationalism and exorcise it from our churches, our religion can do a lot more damage than a six-pack of Lone Star. There is nothing Christian about Christian nationalism. It is the worship of power, social power, economic power, political power in the name of Christ. And it is a betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. He told us we would know them by their fruits. Jesus includes Christian nationalism excludes. Jesus liberates. Christian nationalism controls. Jesus saves. Christian nationalism kills. Jesus started a universal movement based on mutual love. Christian nationalism is a sectarian movement based on mutual hate. Jesus came to transform the world. Christian nationalism is here to maintain the status quo. They have co-opted the Son of God. They've turned this humble rabbi into a gun-toting, gay-bashing, science-denying, money-loving, fear-mongering fascist. And it is incumbent upon all Christians to confront it and denounce it.
Amen.
Christian nationalism is on the rise. 2 years ago, Christian nationalists stormed the U.S. Capitol, killing police officers while carrying crosses and signs reading, "Jesus saves." Last year, Christian nationalists on the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, allowing states like ours to outlaw abortion even in cases of rape and incest. And as we speak, 2 Christian nationalist billionaires are trying to replace public schools in Texas with private Christian schooling. We are closer than we think to a Christian theocracy.
Okay, he's given us quite a bit here to deal with, and we're about 5 minutes into it, a little more than 5 minutes into it. So it's an 18.5-minute speech. This is going to be at least 3 parts, maybe more, before it's all said and done. Okay, so Talarico, one of the things he said was that in 2021, Christian nationalists stormed the U.S. Capitol, killing police officers while carrying crosses and signs reading Jesus saves. Now I have heard the defenses offered by people on the right for why they were at the Capitol, and I've seen the film clips of them being escorted around almost like they're on a tour, closing doors and shaking doorknobs and that kind of thing. And the bottom line is, I don't care. They had no business storming the Capitol like they did. Mike Pence was doing what he was constitutionally mandated to do, and that was to certify the Electoral College votes. He didn't have any authority to throw them out, any authority to change them. I know John Eastman and several others have said, oh yeah, he could have. No, that's not the way it works. It's not the way our representative republic works. Trump lost. It's the way it goes. And I think he could have done more and should have done more to stop it once it got going. Now, of course, he could have said some things before to keep it under control, but he didn't. And so if we see what happened, and yeah, here's one of the gallows. They were supposedly wanting to hang Mike Pence. They were chanting that as they went through the Capitol. And then where are you, Nancy? Looking for Nancy Pelosi, who was then Speaker of the House. And this individual, notice the Holy Bible, going and up there to the Capitol. People are going to see that and think, oh, he's a Christian. Okay, well, Christians can break the law. We can storm the Capitol if we don't get our way. No, that's not it. Or it could create animosity towards Christians as well. And then we've got this one, Jesus saves. I say, dude, put that sign away. Don't be taking that kind of a sign down where there's civil unrest going on and there's protests and things like that. I don't want people getting Jesus mixed up in all of this. He didn't have anything to do with it. He didn't come down and storm anything or start a war of any kind. He came to pay the price for our sins, and he lived a perfectly sinless life so that that could be accomplished. And Talarico in his speech said that we are closer than we think to a Christian theocracy. Well, I'm going to take issue with that. Number one, I don't see the will to do it at the national level or even at the state level. And then we also have this sort of pesky little thing here that we call the First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's it. We're done. Congress cannot pass any law making any kind of a national religion. Now, it's been theorized that the states can do that, and some of the colonies that eventually became states did in fact do that. But I think that's gone by the wayside. I don't think any state has an established or a state-run religion. Utah might be with the Mormons, but I don't know how that plays out. But we have to remember that Congress makes the laws, not the president, not the courts. It's Congress that we have to go to get laws changed or laws passed or whatever it is we think needs to be done. He goes on to say that Talarico goes on to say that in 2022, Christian nationalists on the U.S. Supreme Court voted to overturn Roe versus Wade, allowing states like Texas to outlaw abortion even in cases of rape. Well, I think it's a state issue and it needs to be left to the states and not be taken up to a federal issue. Another problem with this whole thing is Talarico does not, if you noticed in the clip, did not define Christian nationalism. What is it? And then he turns around and says Christian nationalists on the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Where's the proof that they're Christian nationalists or that they're even Christians? Clarence Thomas, I believe, is an active Catholic. And I think Amy Coney Barrett might be a Catholic, but I'm not positive. So where's the evidence? He didn't cite any evidence that they are Christian nationalists. He just made the accusation. Now, one of the favorite targets of the left is this man, Associate Justice Samuel Alito. He is one that the left is coming hard at, and this is about a week out. In fact, the election is 1 week from today when I'm making this. If it turns out that Kamala Harris wins and or the Democrats get a majority, I think they're going to go after him and Clarence Thomas. Why? Well, Thomas is a black man who doesn't think like a Democrat. And Alito's one that has been a reliably conservative vote, unlike his predecessor, Sandra O'Connor. This comes from Americans United for Separation of Church and State in their Church and State article, talking about Samuel Alito and some of his decisions. A quick review of Alito's opinions, particularly over the last decade, confirms that flying Revolutionary era war flags is the latest sign of his commitment to advancing Christian nationalism. Here, once again, we don't have a definition of it. Wrote AU President and CEO Rachel Lasser. In an op-ed distributed by the Progressive magazine, said Alito has achieved Christian nationalist goals, gutting the abortion rights, rolling back access to contraception, limiting LGBTQ plus rights, imposing Christianity on public school students and taxpayers, devastating our Constitution's promise of church and state separation. Don't have any specific cases there to actually look at. And then when it comes to Roe versus Wade, I don't know if this Rachel Lasser or if James Talarico have ever read the opinion. It's only about 24, 25 pages long. I read it years ago, and maybe I need to do a my 2 cents worth segment on it. But long story short, it needed to be overturned. And we needed to get it back to the states. And it does not say why supporting any one of these things is considered Christian nationalism. Now, this is one of the flags that's causing some ire, and this is an Appeal to Heaven flag, or the pine tree flag, one of the flags used during the American Revolution, featuring the pine tree and the motto, an appeal to heaven, or some said an appeal to God. And this was used by a squadron of 6 schooners commissioned under George Washington's authority as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, beginning in October of 1775. The pine tree is a traditional symbol of New England. The phrase appeal to heaven appears in John Locke's second treatise on government, where it is used to describe the right of revolution. The flag is the official maritime ensign of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, though the script was removed in 1971. It was used by the state Navy vessels in addition to privateers sailing from Massachusetts. It is also used by liberty activists and enthusiasts of the American Revolution to commemorate the Pine Tree Riot, one of the first acts of resistance by the American colonists to British royal authority, and eventually culminating in the American Revolution. In the 2020s, the flag was flown at events attended by various, here we go, far-right groups, including a Christian nationalist strand of Donald Trump's Stop the Steal movement. In May 2024, news outlets reported that the flag had been flown at the vacation home of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito in 2023. So it looks like it took him about a year to even catch on to the story. So that should tell us it wasn't such a big deal at the time. This drew media attention because of the flag's use by Stop the Steal supporters. The justice stated that his wife had displayed the flag, referred to the historic background of the symbol, and refused to recuse himself from ongoing cases involving the 2020 United States presidential election. Then Talarico goes on to say that as we speak, 2 Christian nationalist billionaires are trying to replace public schools in Texas with private Christian schooling. Now, I don't know who those billionaires are or exactly what the plan is. My hunch is it's got something to do with school choice, something which Democrats and liberals are typically opposed to. Now, I am an advocate of school choice. And I think it's good because, number one, student safety. Some neighborhood schools are not safe, either because of gang activity or maintenance issues. And sometimes moving is not an option. I made this point once with a friend who said, well, you need to think about that before you buy a house, let the buyer beware, and all that sort of thing. You could buy a house in a neighborhood, and right now the schools are pristine and perfect, but by the time your kid is ready for them, they may not be so perfect. And because of finances or whatever other reason, moving might not be an option. So school choice is what I advocate, and that's part of the reason I advocate for school choice. I also advocate it because then it's increases the parents' satisfaction. You get the parents involved. I'm now paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for my kids' tuition, so you better believe I'm going to be involved. And then it gives student an education tailored to their needs. Not everybody learns sitting in a classroom. I was an employment specialist in a high school for a little while, and I had a couple of students that wanted to be car mechanics. Okay, that's not something you can learn in the classroom. You can maybe read a book and get some basics about an engine and where the spark plug goes and where this or that goes and that. But eventually you've got to get out into the shop and start working on the engines. And so an apprenticeship program or a trade school might be better options for students like that than sitting in a traditional classroom, or maybe even a family business where they can still learn their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s, but they're not having to sit in a classroom and learn out of a book. They're learning it hands-on. School choice provides options for low-income families. My financial situation is I can't sell the house, but the school across the street is terrible. It's not safe. It's got gangs. It's got bad teachers. It's got this, got that. I work on the north side. There's a really good school right there a block away. My kid would be happy there. It's got good discipline. It's got students who aren't or doesn't have as many disruptive students. Okay, I want to move my kid to that school. With school choice, you can do that. If the school board or the school district just looks at your zip code and says, no, you got to go to public school 1, 2, 3, but it's a bad school, now you got to go there. That's the way our system works. You don't have that choice then. And then school choice leads to higher graduation rates. We should be wanting everybody to graduate. Some won't make it for whatever reason. And we should be trying to do what we should be doing, what is going to keep those rates up. School choice saves taxpayer dollars. Bad schools close. They have to stay competitive, so they will not be charging outrageous tuition if they know that other schools are doing the same job for less money. And it puts competitive pressures on the schools. When I hear people opposed to school choice, what I'm hearing is, I want a monopoly on education. I want the government to have a monopoly so that you don't have any place to go but to the government. And when that happens, quality goes right in the tank because there's no incentive to have a quality product or a quality outcome. School choice makes schools more accountable. And this is a point that I made with a principal. We briefly sent our daughter to a private school when we were in a school choice state and used the advantages of the tax code and things like that in the state. But I always tell my daughter's teacher, she's 11, I'll say, look, I'm going to be your best friend or your worst enemy. You know, you help us, we cooperate together, you keep us informed what's going on, then, you know, everything's going to be fine. But if you start mistreating my kid, you belittle her, particularly make fun of her faith or anything like that, we're gonna have issues. And when it comes to school choice, if I'm having those kinds of issues, I can go into the principal and say, look, you got X, Y, and Z going on here. I'm not happy with it. So we need to get this resolved, or me and my kid and that X number of dollars in tuition that I'm sending you, we walk. And the school she was in was only about 300 students. And so you only need a few of those to walk out before you're going to feel it. The school's going to feel it. So that worked to our advantage. With only government schools and no alternative for people like us who are middle income or maybe lower middle class, you've got them completely under your thumb. The government does. The government can say, yeah, so what? Or they can say, yeah, we'll take care of it, and then push it to the back burner. There's no incentive for them to cooperate and help the parents, because in the end, it's going to come down to those federal dollars. And then school choice will make education dollars go further. Again, it's the competition. It'll help keep prices down. And then your kids' school choice make education dollars go further. People are more likely to economize and maximize the money when it's their own. You know, when you've got that third-party payer, like, oh, the government's paying for it. Oh, my insurance company paid for it. It gives the illusion that it's free when it's not. Somebody else is paying for it, and ultimately the costs get passed on to you, the consumer. And then school choice will help cultivate citizens. They are typically, if you have them in a religious setting, they're going to learn not only the tenets of that particular faith, but they'll learn to be good citizens in most Christian-based schools. Now, Talarico mentioned how the early Christians shared everything. And what the problem with a lot of liberals is they look at like this passage in Acts 2, and they say, oh, they were socialists. They shared everything. No. Now, notice it does say all who believed were together and had all things in common and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. Now, this is the day of Pentecost. Acts chapter 2. This is the first day of the church. And they carry out in the days following, and this is reporting how they shared among themselves. They sold their possessions and that kind of thing. But it was voluntary. In a socialist kind of system, it's not voluntary. Your money gets taken from you and redistributed to other people. And here's an example of how they didn't have to do it every time they had a few bucks. Ananias and Sapphira. In Acts chapter 5, a certain man named Ananias with Sapphira his wife sold a possession, and he kept back part of the proceeds. And his wife, also being aware of it, brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. So they sold a possession. It's a piece of land, we find out. And we don't know how much it was sold for, but they got, let's just say $10,000. We'll put it in modern terms to keep everything simple. They sold it for, say, $10,000, but they came and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. So they're holding some of it back. So then Peter says, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the price of the land for yourself? While it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your own control? So you have conceived this thing in your heart. You have not lied to men, but to God. Then Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. So great fear came upon those who heard these things, and the young man arose, wrapped him up, and carried him out and buried him. Now it was about 3 hours later when his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter answered her, tell me whether you sold the land for so much. Again, we don't know the price, but we'll use $10,000. She said, yes, for $10,000, or yes, for so much. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. So they've just now come back from burying her husband. Then immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And the young man came in and found her dead. Oh, here we go. And carried her out. All right, guys, let's get her up and let's get her out of here, and we'll bury her next to her husband. So great fear came upon all the churches and upon all who heard these things. So see, they sold it, say, for $10,000. They could have kept all of it. They could have given half or 10% or 20% to the church and kept all of it. They could have kept 10% and given 90%. Whatever they wanted to do was fine. The problem was they lied about it, probably to make themselves look good. And so, yeah, they shared, but it wasn't like they shared every little tiny thing they had. It wasn't that they always shared. They had to keep back some for themselves. I have to keep back some for myself to support my family. And then Talarico says the early Christians were a peculiar people who shared all their possessions and refused to participate in the economy, the military, or the culture. The book of Acts tells us the first Christians were persecuted for turning the world upside down. By the way, peculiar meant something different in the first century than it does to us today. My guess is he is using peculiar to mean strange or weird, like we use it today. He's acting awful peculiar. It means he's acting strangely. He's acting weird. Peculiar in the original language of the Koine Greek and in the first century meant something unique. I was in a sermon one time and I mentioned this point, that at one time peculiar was taken as something unique or being the possession of one, and not to be strange or anything. Ended the sermon, gave the invitation, and a man in about the second row kind of leans over to me and he says, just want you to know, I think you're peculiar. And then went back to singing, and I thought, a couple of ways he could mean that. Anyway, but that's what it meant, a difference in what it meant now and what it meant then. And so all who believed were together and had all things in common and sold their possessions and goods and divided them all as anyone had need. However, Talarico says that the early Christians refused to participate in the economy, the military, or the culture. Well, that is not true. For instance, Acts chapter 18, after these things, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth. And he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla. Because Claudius, that's the Roman emperor at the time, had commanded all the Jews to depart from Rome, and he came to them. So because he was of the same trade, that's Paul stayed with them and worked, for by occupation they were tent makers. And he, Paul, reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded both Jews and Greeks. They had a tent-making business. They were engaging in capitalism. Someone comes in, hey, I need a tent. Okay, I need it. There's the dimensions that I need, and okay, we'll make it for you for so much. Okay, that sounds good. Go for it. So they were participating in the economy, and are you ready for that? They were capitalists. They're earning a living. How? By setting up a business. And then they in the marketplace, they were making tents, they were buying and selling. So to say that they were not in the economy is just wrong. And here, 1 Corinthians, speaking of Corinth, eat whatever is sold in the marketplace, asking no questions, for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all the fullness and all its fullness. And then in chapter 10, verse 25, if any of those who do not believe invites you to dinner, go and eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you. And for conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. So if I invite you to my house for dinner and we're having steak, and I put it out there, eat it. Don't ask any questions about where it came from. But if I say, you know what, no, we just came from a sacrifice to Zeus and we offered this cow and this is left over from the sacrifice, okay, don't eat it. In the marketplace, same thing. Some of the meat sold there might have come from an animal that was sacrificed to a pagan god, and the remains are being sold in the marketplace. Because usually not all the animal was consumed. Sometimes it was. And so what do, Paul? Do I buy this meat that could have been offered to an idol? Do I eat this meat if that could have been offered to an idol? What do I do? Just eat it. Don't ask any questions. Don't ask, don't tell, basically. And then there's this man, Cornelius, the first Gentile convert to Christianity. And what was his occupation? A Roman centurion, a soldier. And John the Baptist had soldiers come to him and said, well, what should we do? And he said, don't accuse anyone falsely and be content with your wages. Don't know too many soldiers who were content with their wages, though, because never mind. But the idea, and that we know from secular records, there were soldiers from the get-go serving in the military. Now, Tertullian and some of the 2nd and 3rd centuries church fathers said, no, you shouldn't be serving in the military if you are a Christian. And I know there's back and forth about whether or not Christians can even serve on a police force or something like that. So they were serving in the military. Christians were participating in the economy. And this is another artist's rendition of Caesar and Peter coming together and Peter teaching him the gospel. So he's got that patently wrong. So that will do it for this segment of my 2 cents worth. So tell me what you think. Give me your 2 cents worth. Am I right here? Am I missing something in Talarico's speech? We're going to look at the rest of it in coming segments. But leave your comments in the comment section below. And if you have any questions, you can send them to me to timothy4.2.3@gmail.com, or you can leave them in the comment section below. That's going to do it for now. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you in the next video. I'm done and I am out.